Mic check. Mic check.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Confirming I hear you. Check.
Yep, and I can hear you as well. Thank you.
Mic check. 1, 2. Mic check.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. I can hear you. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
All right, good evening, everyone. We will begin with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the lands which constitute the present-day region of Peel as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Wyandot nations. We acknowledge these people and their ancestors as peoples who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. The region of Peel is a home to many global Indigenous peoples. I'm truly delighted to welcome you all to a groundbreaking moment for the Peel Police Services Board, the inaugural community consultation hosted by our Governance and Human Rights Committee today. Your presence here today and to everyone watching online is a testament to the collective commitment we share in fostering meaningful dialogue about police governance and human rights within our community. Before we embark on this vital journey of discussion and discovery, I'd like to extend our sincere gratitude to each of you, our esteemed presenters, for accepting the call to share your insights and your perspectives. Your voices and experiences and ideas are the cornerstone of this consultation's purpose: to engage, to learn, and to collaboratively shape the future of police governance and human rights in our region. I'd also like to thank committee and board colleagues to these here tonight and the entire board for your leadership on this file. Thank you to board member Amadatia, who's here in person today, and our board chair, Nando Yanika, who's actually, I believe, online today. A great big thank you to Chief Duriapa and the police service who have shown their support for enhancing police governance and human rights and who are also present here today. And finally, to Professor, I believe, Professor, is he here already? Perfect. So Professor Akwasi Owusu-Bimba and Alex is here online, I believe, Lescom for their advice, recommendations, and support as we embark on these consultations. I understand that the issues we are addressing today may be complex, multifaceted, and deeply interconnected with the fabric of our community. My committee colleagues and I are eagerly looking forward to engaging in fruitful discussions with you after your presentations. These exchanges will undoubtedly enrich our understanding of the issues at hand and illuminate potential avenues for positive change. The significance of these consultations extends beyond this room as we embrace the principles of transparency and accessibility. The public and diverse audiences who are joining us virtually through our live stream share a commitment to open discourse. Your insights will reverberate, fostering broader understanding and ultimately impacting the direction we take in the realm of police governance and human rights. Your contributions are not merely confined to this session. They hold a pivotal role in shaping the Police Services Board's future actions. Your thoughtful inputs will help us find improvements and innovation, ensuring that our policies resonate deeply with the unique needs of our community. While this is the first community consultation, it'll definitely not be the last. We have additional sessions currently scheduled on October 3rd and November 28th, and we plan to hold similar consultations throughout 2024. Before we move to our first presenter, I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to each of you once again. Your participation today embarks a pivotal step towards a more informed, inclusive, and collaborative future. Together, we have the opportunity to strengthen, trust, promote inequity, and refine the principles of police governance and human rights for a better region of Peel. Thank you for your dedication to this shared endeavor. I'd also acknowledge our board staff and our executive director, Rob Serpe, and Angela Suri, our manager of outreach, and the entire regional Peel staff who's here tonight for supporting us in this journey and helping put tonight together to kick off. As you'll see also, our team, the chief and team are in the back present as well, so they're here to listen, but if there's any clarifications or any additional comments they can provide, they will do so during the sessions. All right, so let's kick this off. Let us embark on this journey of enlightenment, exploration, and positive change. We have several presentations included in our agenda. I'd like to begin with our first presentation today, which will be provided to us virtually by Amira Al-Gawabi, Canada's Special Representative on Combating Islamophobia. Welcome, Ms. Al-Gawabi, and thank you for participating this evening. I am going to remind all of our presenters that you have 5 minutes to provide your remarks, and I will let you know when there is 1 minute left in your session. And following the presentation, I will ask committee members to comment on the presentation or to ask any clarifying questions. So please go ahead and proceed. Thank you. I don't think we can hear you.
All right, let's try one more time. It's always good. Okay, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much, Chair Coley. Thank you so much to the Police Chair, Chair Nando Iannica. Thanks to Board Member Ahmed Attia for inviting me on, as well as to Chief Dorepa for all the leadership that I understand is happening at Peel Police. And it's really wonderful to be able to address you today. I do have a slide presentation, so I'm assuming, yeah, it's coming up on the screen. That's wonderful. I'm very much looking forward to addressing the committee about hate and the role of law enforcement. On to the next slide, where I just make a very quick land acknowledgement in honor of the fact that I am here in Ottawa, joining you today on land that is traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. So today is a very significant day, if we move on to the next slide, to remember the family, the Afzal family, Mediha, Yumna, Salman, and Talat, because today was the beginning of the trial into that deadly attack against this beautiful family that happened just about 2 years ago in June 2021. And so it's within sort of this as a very poignant and important backdrop of talking today to you at this committee about Islamophobia, the impacts that it has on our human rights, our collective well-being, community safety, and how humbled I am to be able to bring this to the Police Services Board on a day such as today. So moving on to just quickly what I'll try to cover in this limited time that I have for you on the agenda on the next slide. So I'll just briefly provide a key definition of what Islamophobia is, talk about some of the efforts to address it at the federal level, how we address hate in our communities, sharing some best practices that I've learned about is happening at Peel and how to enhance those, as well as what's happening in other jurisdictions that may be of help, a quick checklist and some recommendations. So quickly onto the next slide. So the Ontario Human Rights Commission first created a very clear definition about Islamophobia that was later adopted at the federal level through Canada's anti-racism strategy. And so it's always important to start these conversations by identifying what Islamophobia is. It is the racism, stereotypes, prejudice, fear, or acts of hostility directed towards individual Muslims or followers of Islam in general. In addition to individual acts of intolerance and racial profiling, Islamophobia can also lead to viewing and treating Muslims as a greater security threat on an institutional, systemic, and societal level. And oftentimes it is why many of our community members will say that they feel sometimes over-policed and under-protected. And certainly that is something I've heard across the board from law enforcement is not necessarily the intention, but certainly has happened. And so on to the next slide, when we're thinking about hate, it is sadly, if we go to the next slide, it is sadly that it is sort of the acts of violence and even deadly violence that that we're talking about on a day like today that sort of make the headlines. And as you see, sort of this pyramid of hate that was created by an NGO out of the United States, actually this pyramid demonstrates how the very worst manifestations of hate, which can lead to genocide. Actually begin, and can sort of begin much earlier with the beginning of what you see as biased attitudes, stereotyping, insensitive remarks, fear of differences, the microaggressions, and this is all very important as we start to move up that pyramid and you have acts of bias, discrimination, bias motivated violence, and then the very worst, which is of course genocide. Now, for police services, and when we're thinking about a human rights strategy, it is so important that we don't necessarily only focus when it crosses into the threshold of violence or the crime element, that even those acts of bias that can create a feeling of unsafety in a community, there is a responsibility for law enforcement to be tracking those types of incidents and ensuring that communities are well supported. So on to the next slide, if I may. Very briefly, at the federal level, efforts to address Islamophobia have been underway for quite some time, even before the anti-racism strategy of 2019, which talks about various forms of discrimination and racism, including anti-Semitism, anti-Indigenous racism, etc. You had Islamophobia discussed. There was an establishment of an anti-racism secretariat at the national level. Later, right after the tragic killings of the Afzal family, the National Summit on Islamophobia, where a series of recommendations were made by communities across the country for various levels of government, included the call for the creation of the office that I now hold. There is now currently also underway an action plan on combating hate at the national level, as well as other legislation and policies. January 29th, it should be noted, has been now designated a national day of remembrance of the Quebec City mosque attack and action against Islamophobia. To the next slide.
My apologies. I just want to let you know you have 1 minute. Thank you.
Oh my God, time goes by fast. Okay, so very, very briefly, I would say that perhaps we'll skip right to, if I may, to slide number 13, if I may, just straight to the recommendations for the board, and then we can talk about other aspects quickly. And certainly, I hope that the slide deck can be shared with the Police Services Board to have a look at. But what I would like to leave you with is, as you are implementing and thinking about a human rights strategy, it would be very helpful to name Islamophobia as a form of systemic racism that impacts its diverse communities. And in the next round of strategic planning, and in line with your objective in making Peel safer for all, the board should continue to explicitly address hate crimes as an issue of significant public safety and of high priority in order to encourage reporting and continue to provide meaningful support to direct and vicarious victims, as well as ensure that perpetrators are held to account. And finally, the board should ensure adequate resources continue to be provided for both investigations and relevant training for frontline officers and throughout the organization in relation to hate incidents, as I mentioned earlier, hate crimes, Islamophobia, and other forms of discrimination. So very happy to take any questions that folks may have. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much for your time. And I know you couldn't get through all the slides, but I want to assure you that it is being recorded and all the presentations will be available on our website as well. And we will also receive it. I wanted to say thank you to you for taking the time to present today and sharing, your thoughts, your feedback, and also such a detailed presentation. I know that we have some questions. I'm going to turn it over to Board Director Ahmed Attia.
Thank you, Amira, for that presentation. It's unfortunate that we weren't able to go through all your slides, but I do have a number of questions. The first one, you started off by talking about that the trial for the individual who killed the Afzal family in London is about to begin. And so we've come a long way in London, Ontario, from when the incident first happened to this point. Are there any, from your perspective, from what you know about what's happened in London, with the community, with the London police, are there any things that we can learn in how the police engaged on that particular and horrific incident that can be learnings that we can bring to Peel on how to be better equipped and be more prepared for incidents like that?
No, thank you so much, Ahmed, for that question. So I think first of all, when it came to the attack in London, Ontario, what was very much necessary and noticed by community members was how quickly the police were able to communicate out how that this was, as they believed, and as we will see in the trial that comes up in the next few weeks, that it was indeed hate motivated. One of the issues that comes up repeatedly when there is some kind of attack or an incident involving a particular community, a vulnerable community that knows that it may be particularly vulnerable to hate is that it takes a long time often for law enforcement to comment. And there are, legitimate reasons for that. They are often, wanting to gather evidence, wanting to double check and make sure. But what is so key and important is for communities who strongly suspect and believe that they may have been targeted, for that information, even as they're gathering it, to at least comment that this may indeed be a factor, this may be indeed have been a hate motivated crime, and that is quickly communicated, because what happens otherwise is that there is a bit of a vacuum of information, and that can lead to a lot of confusion, misinformation, sadly, that can also lead to further anxiety and further issues. So one of those things that we learned from London was that the quick aspect of communicating to communities, and basically it was because there was such a strong relationship previously established between the services there in London, the police services there, and the broader community, including Muslim community leaders. And just to make a quick note on this point in terms of building those relationships, later this month, my office, along with the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, along with the OSCE, along with CC UNESCO, a bunch of different acronyms. And when you work in government, there's lots of acronyms, but essentially various organizations, we're going to be launching a bit of a toolkit that includes 10 sort of key steps that every law enforcement agency in the country should ensure they're doing when it comes to anti-Muslim hate, but that can equally apply to any vulnerable community. And that includes building those crucial relationships. So that's a very important aspect that we have learned through what happened in London, and that we continue to learn around building those relationships. And in fact, one of Peel's own inspectors, Inspector Faraz Ismail, will be actually participating in that launch with several of his colleagues to share some of the work that is underway in Peel Police, including a very successful, from what I understand from community members, reassurance protocol that also relates to how victims of hate, whether a crime or an incident, within 48 hours are receiving phone call and follow-up from Peel Police in a way that is attempting to reassure that that regardless of whether a charge is going to come out of what they've just experienced, it centers the victims and those who may have witnessed that in terms of being able to reassure them. So that's something that is actually a best case to share for other law enforcement right there from Peel.
Thank you. Another question. I know you haven't been the special representative for that long yet, but is there anything you're aware of that federal police agencies are doing, RCMP or others, around structural Islamophobia within the agency? Not, you even here, we've been talking about hate crimes. This is external and how police responds to kind of Islamophobia among, the residents of the jurisdiction they police. But within the agency, is there any learnings that we can take on structural Islamophobia?
Mm-hmm. So that's part of my mandate, actually, as listed, people can read through, is to provide support to national security agencies on addressing Islamophobia. As I mentioned in the very first definition, one of the issues that has been raised repeatedly is how our communities have been over-policed, over-surveilled, and Islamophobia has a role to play. In fact, in the trial, there's many analysis that have come out today looking at how, for one of the first or second times since the anti-terrorism legislation has been passed after 9/11, where it's being expanded to look at a case like this, where an attacker attacked in a deadly manner and killed people according to an ideology, whereas previously it was often only when it was associated with ISIS or those types of groups where we would see that terrorism charge. So there's certainly an evolution in thinking where law enforcement, national security agencies, and the broader public are starting to understand that there are all sorts of potentially dangerous ideologies that can lead to harms against our community. So any type of human rights strategy has to really encompass that reality that's been there for a long time, but sadly it's taken the killing of many various minority community members for people to understand that.
Thank you. And Chair, if I may ask one last question. You had a slide, we didn't get to hear it, but you've talked about hate crimes. There's one slide on that. My question to you is, as a police board, we have a policy that requires an annual report on hate crimes in Peel. I know that statistic is published nationally as well. And we get hate crime statistics by faith, by community, by race, by type. And are you aware, can you give us some feedback on that reporting? Are there areas where that reporting can be improved? Are there things that we're missing? And do you think, I often hear that hate crimes are not really reflective of the true number of hate crimes that, that exist. So can you give us some quick perspective on that?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things I would say. First, we know that what is being reported is a tiny slice. So according to Statistics Canada, 80% of people who say they've been victims of hate crimes do not report to police. 80%, and so even of that, the rest of the folks who do report, a very small number of them are actually considered to have crossed that threshold into criminal behavior. So it's 1% that shows up at the end on the Statistics Canada police reported hate crimes. So what we see as a society is not reflective of the hate that people are experiencing on a day-to-day in their communities, number one. Number two, one of the reasons for the lack of reporting is the barriers that exist. And so, for example, here in Ottawa, we work to encourage the Ottawa Police Service to allow people to report hate incidents or hate crimes through their online portal, which allows for certain crimes to be reported online. And the Ottawa Police Service is one of the only services that have allowed that as one more way to remove some barriers for reporting. The other point about your stats is that there's no intersectionality to the statistics. So for instance, if I am targeted for various reasons, if I as a visible Muslim woman being targeted for being a woman as well as being Muslim, et cetera, and all the different intersectionalities that can include, when police go to register that, oftentimes they will only be able, well, actually every time they can only record one type of identity. That's just the way the software works, and that is something that has been raised with Statistics Canada and with police services, because certainly people can be targeted for multiple identities, so it doesn't necessarily tell us the full picture. And the last point about reporting, it is excellent that the Peel police do record both incidents as well as the crimes and are tracking and monitoring that. That is really important, because oftentimes, yes, there may be an incident that doesn't cross into criminal behavior, but it still allows police to have a more accurate picture of what's happening in communities. And should a criminal act happen later on, they can sort of see there was a history to activities in a particular area or against a particular community. But what I would recommend, and this is also happening in Ottawa, is more regular reporting out to the community. So not just the once a year snapshot, but maybe on a more quarterly basis to community that are looking for those numbers and want to see what's happening, as well as reporting out on how many cases are actually getting investigated, prosecuted, and closed as well. So the Globe and Mail did a recent analysis of that across 10 of the major urban centers where hate crimes are being investigated, and did a little bit of a breakdown. As you know, I think the close rate of most cases, and the top cases, Peel I think came in second for 28% of hate crimes cases actually being closed, according to Mike Hager's reporting there. So there's a lot to be said, but it is, I think I would just conclude to say, as many of you may have heard this before, but hate crimes are indeed message crimes, and the reverberations beyond the victim, their family, to the greater community. And so having that really focused victim-centered approach to addressing it, to help people be able to, get back into their day-to-day activities, is so critical and important, and for the broader community to feel safe.
Thank you so much for your presentation today, and I think that's all for the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, to our next speaker. Our next speaker is from Sakina Canada, I believe. Perfect. If you wanted to just come down here to the front. Thank you. Yep, just right to the front, those two chairs. Yep. Yeah. And you'll see right in front of you the mics, and then there's a speak. So you'll just have to, when you speak, you just have to press that. I want to remind you, you have 5 minutes, and I will try my best to be as kind as possible to let you know 1 minute. And if you wanted to both introduce yourselves as well before you speak. Thank you so much.
Well, first off, thank you for having us here. My name is Nazish. I'm the Executive Director at Sakina Canada.
And my name is Miriam. I am the Director of Programs and Services for Sakina.
Okay, so Sakina is a national registered charity. We operate a number of different programs, including 7 transitional shelters across Canada. We have a food program in the GTA, in Peel actually, for anyone facing food insecurity. We offer remote casework to anyone across Canada. We have a free mental health program, and we are also a fostering agency. Primarily we deal with the clients who are victims of domestic violence, although we do help women who have experienced any sort of trauma. 95% of our clients are people of color, 43% are newcomers and refugees. And some of the challenges that we've heard from our clients regarding reporting to the police or even having police involved within their situations has been language barriers, misconceptions that they have of the police, and their lack of knowledge of their rights, and also their lack of knowledge of reporting or what reporting actually means, like the steps that need to be taken. So sometimes they fear that they may be the one being arrested or their children may be taken away if they get the police involved. So those are just a number of challenges that our clients have.
So in addition to that, we recently had a woman who was experiencing domestic violence, IPV, and we had suggested to her to contact the police because from our end, there wasn't something that we could report. And the woman refused. And it wasn't until she had basically said that, she fears for her life and that if her husband comes home, that something will happen to her, that we were able to actually report. And one of the things that we experience in our organization, as well as the clients that we work with, is that it shouldn't have to get to that point. It shouldn't have to go that far for somebody to experience fear of life or fear of harm in any capacity for us as a community to be involved. Brampton is actually one of our homes in Brampton is our second home, and it's also one of our largest homes. It's our second largest home. And we opened this home in 2020. And since then, we've had to call police a number of times because there have been clients that have had experiences of their partners coming into the home or by the home or threatening to harm them or hurt them. And so some of the recommendations and suggestions that we feel would be beneficial would be to actually have like a liaison, someone in the Brampton area that would be able to connect with our organization as well as the community members and be able to provide that support. There is also a language barrier like Nazish mentioned, and having people of the same who look like our clients, who speak the same language, who are able to connect with our clients in a way that is helpful to them would also be helpful. When I used to work at another organization, we actually had a police officer come in and speak to it was a school, so the children that I worked with. And so having police officers actually coming in and actually walking through what the process or the step-by-steps look like of reporting. The reporting process in and of itself is very challenging. And we know from the reporting all the way to the court system, the client is going to have to be called up and spoken to many, many times. So finding a way to have that reporting system a little bit more accessible, not just in a language that they're able to understand, but also in the process in which they're able to tell their story once, maybe twice, in a way that they don't have to repeat it in court and then become re-traumatized. A lot of our clients, when they come into our home, they're able to stay for about 12 months or so. And within that time, they're able to heal from their trauma. But then when they get called back into the court system, they get re-traumatized, and then they contact us again to ask, we need support in terms of how to deal with actually speaking to the court. What am I going to do if I have to see my the perpetrator again? What is that going to look like for my family moving forward? And so it's really so one of the suggestions is also to have the process in a way that's more accessible to the clients that we work with. And also, I know I mentioned language, but language in a way that is, a lot of these clients don't have the ability to understand from a perspective of somebody who has actually lived or was raised in Canada. They're coming from a country in which the laws and regulations look completely different. So having a way of essentially like bridging that gap so that they're able to actually understand what reporting and speaking to the police looks like.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to both of you for coming today and doing this presentation. And thank you for creating awareness of all the work you guys are doing at Sakina Canada. I think it's critical work and saving lives. And, you know, the fact that you have so many refugees and newcomers also feeling safe enough to come to you and share, that says a lot of work you're doing in the community to create awareness. I think the other part that you did today was very clearly provide things that you can do to, you know, that hopefully maybe we can do to support as well. So I think that was very valuable. I wanted to see if we had any, Emmett, did you want to go ahead and add?
I have two questions. The first is, you know, a number of years ago, just, you know, I think 2 years ago or so, Peel Police opened up our Intimate Partner Violence Center, and I've had the pleasure of touring it. And how aware is your Brampton shelter of the center, and do you engage with it at all? Are your clients aware of it when they come to you? I'm just trying to understand how much, is there more outreach needed to?
The only center that we were aware of was actually VQRP services. So we didn't even know that there was an IPV center that clients can actually access services.
Okay. My second question is, you know, many of your comments revolve around education. People who come here who don't understand. I wonder, you know, I'm just trying to wonder how that materializes. Like, how do you operationalize that education piece? Because, you know, people often, they're in that situation not by choice, and then they come to your shelters for support. I'm just trying to think, imagine a police officer came into your shelter to educate people. It doesn't seem like. So how does educate? Do you have any more specifics around how the police service could better outreach and educate?
So I know when we talk about education, we can talk about it from the three levels, the macro, meso, and then micro. But I think there's also a hidden level that we need to actually activate, which is the communal level. So having people that actually look like us attending events and actually having conversations. So we run a number of different workshops within the community, and having people actually come up and having the ability to speak about you know, the processes as well as what it looks like would be very valuable for the community that we serve.
Thank you. And I just want to say, you know, Sakina Holmes, you do wonderful work. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. I also wanted to turn it over to Chief Duriappa and his team in the back.
Thank you, Chair. And through the Chair, I want to thank you for your presentation. It's a pleasure to, obviously, we do concur with you as it pertains to the barriers that are either language, representation, or process that particularly our community sees because of our demographics at a rate that is not seen anywhere else nationally. So we'd be happy. One of my deputies, Nick Milanovic, is here, who oversees our Family Justice Intimate Partner Violence Unit. We'd be happy to connect with you because we do believe that ensuring that our program delivery continues to evolve with the sensitivities that are ethnocultural for our community need to happen. So if there's an opportunity subsequent to the presentation, maybe Nick, if you'd be happy to connect, that would be appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief. Thank you so much, ladies, for coming out today. Next presenter, we have Imam Ibrahim Hindi from the Religious Director of Yaqeen and Imam at Dar el Tawheed Islamic Center. Thank you, Imam. So same as the ladies, you'll see a mic in front of you and there's a speak button. Just press on the speak button when you'd like to speak. And I want to just remind you kindly that we have 5 minutes, and I'll try to interject with a 1-minute warning. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to me today and allowing me to present today. So like you said, my name is Ibrahim Hindi. I'm the Imam at the Dar al-Tawheed Islamic Center and the Tawheed Community Center. I'm here to speak about my experiences as the Imam of the mosque, because in 19 March 2022, a man attacked our mosque. For those who aren't aware of it, he entered the mosque in the early morning hours during the morning prayers. He had bear spray and a hand axe. He emptied his bear spray on the people who were praying. Their backs were towards him. He took out a second bottle of bear spray, began to empty that one out. At that point, the congregants turned around. An elderly man confronted him, was hit on the wrist with the axe, suffered minor injuries due to that. and then a young man was able to tackle him, and they were able to subdue him until the police arrived. I was traveling at the time, but I came back to try to support my community at that time. We have a mosque and a school that the mosque operates. So we have children at that mosque constantly. And as you can imagine, in the aftermath of that attack, there was a lot of apprehension, anxiety, and fear. We had gone through 2 years of lockdown, and that was 2 weeks before Ramadan. So it was going to be the first Ramadan after lockdown. And people were afraid to come to the mosque at that time, which was incredibly difficult for us to deal with. We asked for police support in the aftermath of the attack, for there to be a presence there when parents are dropping off their kids or picking them up, and when we have prayers, especially as we entered into Ramadan. And to the credit of the police force, they were there and they were supporting us. But I'll say that we did have to kind of fight for that support. And the police were kind of mentioning that they have limited resources and they can't have police there at all times. And for sure, that's something that is a concern. But from our perspective, we felt we really needed that. Parents are afraid and people were terrified. And I would say because of my experience dealing with the police in the past, I knew that if I kept pressing, that they would respond, and they did. But I feel that if it happened at a different center where people were maybe less aware of the system and knowing how to deal with police and not knowing police officers in their personal life, having had conversations with them, I think they would have had a much more difficult time getting that kind of support. And I think the police should be more open to that sort of support, because it's a benefit to the police as well, because it builds trust with the community. And that kind of leads to the second point, is a general feeling of mistrust that I was experiencing through this entire incident. So for example, the police took statements from all of the people who were eyewitnesses. And later on, the police were calling the eyewitnesses to ask follow-up questions. I had a meeting with all the eyewitnesses when I returned from my travel right after this incident. And one of the men stood up and he said, "The police are calling you to ask you questions, and you're going to forget things because we're human beings and we forget when things happen. And then people are going to use that contradiction, or you forgetting something from the first time they ask you questions to the second time. So don't answer any questions the police ask you." And that just goes towards the mistrust that a lot of regular people have. And I was trying my best to tell them, no, the police are not trying to catch you in a lie. They're asking this question for the sake of investigating this case. But there's a lot of mistrust in the community. That's something that I was able to see. One of the things that also plagued us was the initial reporting. The police did come out and say that this was being investigated as a hate-motivated crime. But there was a unique aspect to this case, which I think a lot of people have trouble, even myself, to be honest, have trouble wrapping our heads around it, which is that the perpetrator hails from a Muslim majority country. He has a name that suggests that he's Muslim, and yet he attacked a mosque. And it's true, he was hate motivated. He hated Muslims and had no connection to the mosque and came in to attack people. But when it was communicated to the media and to the public that this was hate motivated, people couldn't understand that. So people began to think that it's sectarian in nature, or began to come up with different rumors. I heard 100 different rumors about why the mosque had been attacked. And the people who attend the mosque felt like we were double victimized. We were victimized by the attack, then we're victimized by all these rumors and suggestions that people were making about why the mosque had been attacked. We ended up calling a press conference to try to set the records straight and to show that there had been a paper trail online of this individual writing against Muslims, just hating Muslims for the reason of them being Muslim and no other reason beyond that. But because of the uniqueness of the case, I think the public communication was difficult for us to deal with. Some of the victims also had trouble accessing help. We did offer them support from ourselves, and I know the police did direct them to other mental health support that they could access. But there was a young man, 13 years old, who was there at the time, and he's suffered PTSD since then. And his parents had a lot of trouble navigating the system and getting support for him. So I think there's a lot of hand-holding that needs to be done with victims in the aftermath of these attacks, because they do fall through the cracks. In general, one of the issues as well, and I don't know that there's really a solution to this, but the prosecution couldn't give us details of the case because they didn't want to harm the case. At the same time, they asked us, what do you think about the plea that's being set here? But we can't give an opinion. It's hard to give an opinion about what we think is a justified sentence when we don't know the facts of the case. And so it was only after he pled guilty and the plea deal was agreed to that we found out the facts of the case, and we found out how deep it went, which was difficult for us to deal with. So I don't really know the solution to that, but it was something that was, really difficult for us to deal with. How do you give your opinion on what a proper sentence should be for a crime when you don't actually know the extent of that crime? So that was a difficult thing for us to deal with throughout this case. In general, I did see a deep lack of mistrust that runs in the community, not even just the Muslim community, but just people in general. And I think that there's something to do with communication there that needs to address the mistrust in people and the communication that comes from police forces. I don't know exactly all the answers. I'm just here really to give my experience of what we went through. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imam Hindi, for coming out today and sharing your experience and also your insights. I'm going to just turn it over to our board director, Atia. I know you had some questions.
Thank you, Imam Ibrahim, for coming today. Two things jump at me from your remarks. The first is your comment about navigating the police service, and you have experience, you probably have relationships, you're a leader in the community. So, and you commented that others would not be able to navigate if not connected. I guess the first point of contact with the police service 911, and then beyond that, people don't really know the chief or the deputy or other leadership. Any thoughts on how that could be improved? How do you overcome that, particularly with community leaders and others?
Yeah, so, on that particular, the ask that we were asking for, which is more support, I thought that even if I didn't know the police, if I asked for that kind of support, I think there should be less resistance to it. I understand resourcing matters. I understand you have limited police officers and limited, and you have, cases that you're dealing with. I understand that, but there's a benefit in the police being present in those kinds of circumstances. So there should be less resistance, even if the person doesn't have a relationship with the police. But I do think that it was valuable in the past for people, whether people work in diversity with the police force, have come up to the mosques and have met with people, and that was one of the the points of contact that I have. Those kinds of relationships that happen before an incident like this would ever take place are really important, so that you do have some capacity to speak to a police officer that you have a pre-existing relationship with and say, hey, this is what we're going through, what do you think? If you don't have that relationship, I think it's really, really difficult to sometimes even ask for the support that you need, because you don't even think that they're going to respond to it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out today. Our next speaker is Rabia Kader, CEO of Dean Support Services. Perfect. Good evening, Rabia. Thank you for being here.
Right here, got it, okay.
Yeah, it's on.
Good evening, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak here, and yes, those steps are not very accessible, may I add, to the region of Peel, and I'm sure I've said this before. I'm here to speak as the CEO of Dean Support Services, as somebody with lived experience, having been a resident of Peel from the age of 6, in fact, as a family member of individuals with disabilities, including developmental disabilities, one of whom had significant engagement with law enforcement due to behaviors, and as a mother, as an advocate, as a former commissioner with the Ontario Human Rights Commission, as somebody who served on has been involved in standards development and the implementation of accessibility legislation in this province and in this country and in this municipality. So as a service provider, as an advocate, I have heard many stories that surround the lived experience of people with disabilities and their engagement with the criminal justice system, where their behaviors as a result of their disability, particularly folks with autism, with global developmental delay, intellectual disabilities, Down syndrome, et cetera, where their behaviors are in fact criminalized, right from the age of, let's see, what was it, 6 years old or 8 years old with the school board, where a child was handcuffed by police officers in order to manage that child. Young men, particularly racialized men, due to their masculine presence, the color of their skin, are often profiled and handled in ways that are unjust and inappropriate in terms of the level of force used when an incident occurs. People who need supports and end up resorting to engaging police are at their wits' end when they do so, when they need other supports and services. There's a tremendous gap in how we offer crisis support to individuals with intellectual disabilities and their families. Police end up being that emergency vehicle, and yet there's a lack of understanding and awareness of the complexity of those intersectional experiences of racialized people with disabilities. In fact, we've had in the last couple of years, a couple of occurrences that I have discussed with Peel Regional Police at length, involving young male Muslim Middle Eastern men with intellectual disabilities and police involvement because of a behavioral episode that they have had, due to the lack of sensitivity in the community, due to the lack of training that perhaps officers may have, the fact that we simply look at what we visibly see and we visibly profile as the color of their skin or their appearance or you know, their cultural, ethnocultural background and their masculinity, in this case, being males. This also goes into the racialized experiences of deaf people. So deaf Black people are often stopped and questioned, and it is not recognized that they in fact are telling the truth. They cannot hear, they cannot speak, or when they can speak, that they are actually not hearing the instructions or questions being asked of them. And their, again, response is criminalized. There is a tremendous gap in training and education. It's not just a checkbox. We don't just have an accessibility plan and accessibility training. We need ongoing learning entrenched in our equity, diversity, and inclusion work, and not compartmentalized separately as those disabled people and their needs versus every other equity-seeking group that falls under EDI.
My apologies, 1 minute.
So again, I emphasize the need for ongoing training, centering the principle of nothing about us without us, as articulated in the Accessible Canada Act, as again principled behind the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act and the Ontario Human Rights Code and our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. People with disabilities have equal rights to others. The intersectional experiences of racialized people with disabilities need special attention, and I put that word special in huge quotes, not special needs, but extensive training and orientation to appreciate assessing their experiences, and further tools and resources to support officers to investigate incidents where there's injury or harm inflicted, state-sanctioned injury and harm inflicted through prescribed or medically authorized interventions in institutions where people with disabilities live, and not just disregarding their injuries or harm inflicted upon them as a course of intervening because they had aggressive behaviors. And I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just going to open it up for any questions. Board Director Ahmed Attia.
Thank you. I have a few questions, Sarabia. At the board level, because this consultation is really focused at the board level from a governance perspective. So I have a question on that level. You know, is I don't think we have an existing reporting policy on understanding the interactions or maybe use of force or others around specifically people with disability. At least I don't recall. I mean, I could be wrong. But are there any data points that come to your mind? Because our reports at a board are what give transparency to the public and also give our board the ability to kind of recommend, changes. So are there any data points that come to your mind that would be useful to report on to understand how police engage and interact with individuals with intellectual disabilities or other types of disabilities? Yeah, that's my question.
I think there's limited research in this area. Overall, 22% of the Canadian population at least lives with disabilities, and a significant number of those are folks with intellectual disabilities. People with intellectual disabilities globally are the most disadvantaged, the most vulnerable, the most isolated, abandoned, and abused. In fact, within Canada, we have 1 in 4 Canadians with a disability, 23% living in poverty, which also then contributes to their experiences on the street and the behaviors that they may be experiencing, and that cuts across all disabilities. For specific data, you can look at perhaps Inclusion Canada may have research around this, but I'm sure there's a gap in disaggregated data that takes race and disability into account that we're working to remedy, but there's limited data on that.
Okay, thank you. When you talk about training, I'm just trying to imagine, because the officers I've been on, I met many officers over my term, and we're demanding of them to be trained on so many things. And for the last while, it's we've been very focused on mental health with the new mental health strategy the police released, and putting them through human rights training. And I think about these things, and I wonder, can you actually train officers on identifying and understanding symptoms, or how to identify that someone has a disability when they're interacting with them? What does that look like? Do you think it's actually possible to have an effective training program so officers do better on those calls?
I believe we can, but like I said, it needs to be ongoing learning. It's not a one-off. It's not one person's experiences. I can talk to you about my brother's experiences, but my brother does not represent every individual with an intellectual disability. Every individual presents very differently. Their behaviors vary. Their capacity it varies. Their ability to understand and follow instructions varies, and how they understand and use language varies, in fact. So again, it's an ongoing learning process, and it's also a process of building relationships with vulnerable groups. When we talk about, serving and protecting, we also have to serve and protect our community's most vulnerable members. And we also, when we look at the idea of community safety and well-being, it is not just the community, it is the well-being and safety of individuals as well. So I think it's sort of a philosophical viewpoint also that needs to be reinforced through policy.
And so just one last, if you may allow me. I imagine your organization, like many other organizations, have limited resources, and the demand is high, and especially in this space, frankly. But are there, whether yours or others, who may have capacity to work with to work with the service or the board on these gaps, on data points, or on what training could look like, or is there a particular organization who works with individual disabilities?
The will is there for organizations, and we can pull organizations together to do this kind of work. We're doing some work around the intersection of race and disability nationally through Race and Disability Canada, in order to address gaps even amongst the disability community around the understanding of the intersection of race and disability. But again, it takes resources as small NGOs, emerging NGOs, as transfer payment agencies that are mandated to provide specific services. Taking on this kind of systems change work to support another service with tools, resources, and knowledge and data is a challenge. Is it possible through collaboration? Yes. Do resources need to be put toward it? Yes, my agency operates on $1 million budget, serving, several individuals and families across the region on 7 days a week, in fact, and on demand. I am the crisis support on my cell phone for people that need me on demand. But I'm not funded the way government mandated agencies or transfer payment agencies are. So do I have the capacity? Does my team have the capacity to do this work? We have the will. We need the resources.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next presenter is virtual, I believe. Sean Ullah, he's from Government Relations Officer, National Council of Canadian Muslims. Sean, welcome.
Hi, sorry. Thank you so much for having me. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I just want to remind you, you have 5 minutes, and I will give you a 1-minute warning when the time comes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks again for having me here today. Please forgive me as I am losing my voice and have a relentless cough, but I appreciate your patience in advance. So first off, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Executive Director Rob Serp, Ms. Coley, yourself, and the esteemed members of the Peel Police Services Board for facilitating this crucial public consultation. I'd also like to thank the previous speakers for bringing up a lot of insight on Islamophobia, and I'll do my best to not repeat already said concerns. My name is Sean Ullah. I'm a Government Relations Officer for the National Council of Canadian Muslims, also known by its acronym NCCM. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the organization, we are a non-for-profit dedicated to safeguarding Canadian human rights and civil liberties, countering discrimination and Islamophobia, fostering mutual understanding, and advocating for the concerns of Canadian Muslims. This opportunity for meaningful dialogue is vital, and we're honored to contribute by addressing the pressing issue of, in this case, Islamophobia within policing. As proponents of human rights, we believe that addressing Islamophobia within law enforcement is paramount. Instances of bias and discrimination have regrettably affected interactions between police officers and Muslim individuals, eroding trust and yielding negative outcomes for both the community and law enforcement. The increase in hate crimes targeting Muslims in the Peel region and across Canada, in this case indicated by Peel Police's hate-motivated crime reports, is deeply concerning. However, underreporting, as mentioned by my previous members here, hinders an accurate assessment of the full extent of the problem. Fear of retaliation and doubts about effective resolution contribute to this alarming trend. Moreover, the absence of robust accountability mechanisms perpetuates Islamophobia within the police force. Instances such as the tragic killing of Ijaz Chaudhry underscore the need for transparent investigations and consequences for officers involved in wrongful actions. The display of symbols like the thin blue line patches adopted by far-right groups exasperates community tensions and erodes trust. Such symbols are particularly inappropriate in places of worship, and especially during sensitive incidences, as an example being when Peel Police responded to the attack that took place at the Dar al-Tawheed Mosque earlier last year in Mississauga. To address these issues, we propose the following solutions. Cultural competency training. We request that you implement comprehensive cultural competency and sensitivity training for all police officers. This training should encompass religious practices, customs, and biases, fostering understanding and respectful interactions. Community engagement programs. Establishing regular community engagement initiatives where law enforcement officers interact with residents in non-enforcement settings. This proactive approach cultivates positive relationships and mutual understanding. Continuing to work closely with the OHRC, the Peel Regional Police should actively collaborate with the Ontario Human Rights Commission and ensure effective implementation of the existing Memorandum of Understanding between the two entities. Transparent investigations. Urge for greater transparency in investigations of incidents involving police misconduct. The outcomes of investigations and subsequent actions taken must be publicly disclosed to ensure accountability and rebuild community trust. Diverse hiring practices is huge, so encouraging police departments to actively recruit individuals from diverse backgrounds, including Muslims. A more representative force enhances understanding and empathy. Also, a review of symbolism. So collaborating with law enforcement agencies to evaluate the use of divisive symbols on uniforms. In this case, the thin blue line, replacing these symbols with ones that promote unity and inclusivity is much more helpful and beneficial for the community and the force. And
My apologies. Just wanted to let you know you have 1 minute. Thank you.
thank you. And of course, public awareness campaigns. So partnering with the departments to launch campaigns that educate community about their rights and how to report these hate crimes, and the importance of reporting incidents for accurate data is also a great solution. And in conclusion, again, I extend my gratitude to all of you for allowing us to contribute to this vital discussion on governance and human rights. By embracing solutions, I really believe that we can collectively combat Islamophobia, foster this trust, and create a safer and more inclusive community for everyone. Thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer my best.
No, thank you so much for staying. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you for your presentation and your comments as well today. I'm going to just turn it over to Board Director Atia.
Thank you, Sean, for your presentation and the work that NCCM does. I have a question about something you didn't talk about, and you may not know the answer, but police services are diversifying in their membership. So, and here in Peel, I'm very proud how far we've come in the last 4 years and the diversity we're seeing when I attend graduations. It's you can see the continued diversity that's happening. But the number of Muslim officers, I think, are kind of on the lower end as Muslim continues to be more aware of this, career opportunity. And but across the board, just because NCCM has a national reach and data-wise, has NCCM ever been exposed to cases of barriers that Muslim police officers face as employees? Because of their faith or just systemic Islamophobia within the service or systemic racism in general?
To answer your question, and you're right in saying that I actually don't know the accurate answer to that in terms of barriers that Muslims have faced when applying for police jobs, in this case, the Peel Police. But I do know that, partnering, with community organizations or religious institutions such as the masajids, the mosques, or even advocacy groups like us, we can actively promote police recruitment opportunities amongst these members. These collaborative efforts can definitely lead to a wider pool of applicants from diverse backgrounds. Just speaking to, the low, you said the low number of Muslims that you may have in the police force. But in terms of barriers, I can definitely get back to you on that. And the force, we'd love to keep in contact with you and answer any further questions you have.
Okay, and my last question, you made several comments about the symbolism, this thin blue line. And my understanding, from what I know, this thin blue line has a range of interpretations, and a person would wear it for possibly different interpretations or understandings. Now, but I care more about when an officer wearing that thin blue line walks into a mosque. That's the example you used, particularly, I think, the Dar Tawheed Mosque, the one we just heard about with the incident. And a Muslim sees an officer with that on their uniform, how does that impact the resident? What does it mean to them that impacts their engagement with the officer? Yeah.
Of course, and that goes back to, the relationship between maybe Muslim individuals and the police and it eroding trust. And it's not to say that that specific police officer may have the intention of wearing that to be offensive, but it's more so about, we can sit here and debate the origin of the thin blue line, but it's very well known that far-right groups like the Proud Boys and the Three Percenters have both adopted the thin blue line as a symbol. These groups perpetuate hate speech. They have very anti-immigrant ideologies. They've been listed as terrorist entities by the government of Canada. So people like myself or people of immigrant backgrounds who are Muslim and they see the symbol, well, that's kind of where their mind goes, and they don't know if this police officer in this case, has their best interests at heart. In 2020, the RCMP announced a ban on wearing the thin blue line patches on officers' clothing. Ottawa Police and Vancouver Police followed suit. I think last year, the Calgary Police Commission announced a directive to replace the thin blue line as well. So it's just really reevaluating that symbol. And maybe I know people have indicated, or some commissions have indicated, that maybe having a blue ribbon instead, to commend fallen officers and the great work that, of course, the police does for the community is an alternative. But again, it is a symbol that many people like myself and minority groups out there see as something against them, as a us versus them kind of deal.
Thank you so much for your presentation tonight. Thank you. Our next presenter is Michael Okoli, Director, IT and Business Operations, NetAct Services, Inc. Good evening, Michael. And same thing, Michael, you'll see the speak button just below the speaker there. Just press that. Should be red, lit up, and take it away. I just want to remind you of 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you. One second. Okay. Good evening once again. Thanks everyone for the opportunity to be here today. So I quickly came up with this presentation slide just to respond to some of the calls that came to our community. So I'm going to go straight up to the research that we put together. As you may see, I'm going to touch on just the third item there, harsh and unnecessary heavy-handed treatment, such as being treated in a rude or discriminatory way, excessive or unwarranted charges, or unnecessary calls for officer reinforcement. These are some of the challenges that we as Blacks are facing. Real quickly, the research also shows that racialized people being racially profiled in various interactions with police include being followed by police unnecessarily, police stops of pedestrians and drivers, searches, including strip searches, police investigation using DNA sweeps in some cases, arrest, excessive use of force or restraint, reprisal. So these are some of the reports we got from the research that we conducted. So quickly, we all know what this racial profiling is about, and we're just going to touch on what needs to be done, what decisive steps needs to be taken, in order to avoid this profiling, which, in return result into trust, loss of trust, with the police, and of course, loss of confidence as well. So we came up with decisive steps, such as ensuring that we have the police support, a collaborative, and of course, an engaging program that can allow our people to come out and freely express themselves and share important data necessary for the police to conduct their activities. What are ways by which we can address some of this racial profiling by the police? Anti-bias training and awareness program for our communities, developing policies, procedures. So you had earlier mentioned their data to actually come up with some of these policies and procedures. And I'm sure that if you reach out, some members of our community will be able to provide with some of these data necessary to put together this governance and policies. Effective accountability monitoring, accountability mechanism include complaint procedure. How do we complain? As an immigrant, I've had several times where I've been profiled by the police. In some cases, I have neighbors around who just report unnecessarily, and they would call, and I would try to explain my own stance. The experience, it's not something I want to share here. So we need to have complaint procedure. How am I going to be able to complain effectively such that I will be heard? Disciplinary measures, collecting, analyzing, and reporting on data, holistic organizational change strategy, leadership. We also need leadership from the police. And leadership means direction, guidance. It means helping people to chart their course. So a lot of times the experience we've had with the police is more of, permit me to use the word bully. They look at us and, they see nothing in us and they come, sort of like a harass, let me put it that way. So we need some kind of leadership where if someone is found wanting or found committing a crime, we need a direction, a guardian, we need someone who's going to, hold our hands and say, hey, this is what needs to be done to avoid this kind of racial profiling. Engagement with affected stakeholders, and of course, continue to call for collection of data. Already you requested that, so if you feel you need some data from us, for sure, feel free to reach out So most importantly, we also put together a few human rights for some of us who probably do not know that we have some rights to do some things when we're being accosted by the police. So we have the, what you need to do and what you don't need to do when you're being arrested. And of course, we also have what you need to do when you're being profiled as well. So
Sorry,
that's
my apologies. Just want to let you know you have 1 minute.
yeah.
Thank
So
you.
that's that on my slide. So just going to take a few examples from some of this racial profiling that I mentioned. Once I was walking on the street and I saw this young man being harassed by the police. I was forced to, walk up to the police to say, I don't know if you have any information about this guy, but I was just standing next to this guy and he looks like someone who was just having a good time on the street. So, and the policeman said to me, you don't have any business here. And I quietly just went away. So for me, I felt that was intimidating. I felt that was really uncalled for. But again, thank you for giving the opportunity to be here today to be able to share this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Coley, for taking the time to come out tonight and share. I wanted to turn it over to, I guess it's on the back, maybe Deputy Eduardi, if you could share a little bit of the work that's actually been recently done.
Thank you, and through the chair, and I appreciate the delegation today, very thoughtful, and I have been taking notes. Much of what you have presented today is addressed in the work that lies before us with the Ontario Human Rights Commission, the Peel Police Services Board, and the service. However, not all of it. And so I think tonight is a very good example of when we can also learn, receive the information. I see some of the members from ARAC, the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee here today. And we will take back this feedback and ensure that it is reflective in the recommendations. And if you don't mind, perhaps I can personally contact you to gain further insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Eduardi. I'd like to turn over to our Director Amaratia.
Thank you. I have two questions, Michael. Thank you for your presentation. The first is this actual slide, the point about collecting, analyzing, reporting on data, and in the area of complaints. The Peel Police Services Board has a policy where the service has to report to us on complaints that have been, submitted or and addressed annually. You may not have seen it. Often our policies are not reviewed in detail by the residents, but I wonder if you have some perspective on that policy in the reports. And if you don't, I'd really be interested if you and your organization can take a look at that policy and share with us, at some point, opportunities for improvement on that policy. My second question is, you talked about know your rights. It was an interesting slide because often it's the way police and the individual, when they engage and interact, that influences how that engagement goes, and knowing your rights is an important way to ensure that that people know exactly what this says, know your rights. So how do we teach, how do we reach out to youth? How do we educate youth on knowing their rights in the community, and not just youth, but the community in general?
Thank you so much. So I think we have, quite a huge platform as a Black community. We do have lots of programs going on. Recently, I've been engaging with the Black Economic Department, which is led by Gwen, and I think she's sitting right here. Platforms like that where we help with settlement for refugees, newcomers, asylum seekers. That's a good platform where you can actually, come in and, educate us, share some of the things we need to know in order to address some of these issues in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation today. Next, we have Hassan Al-Falou, Mississauga Head Chapter, Muslim Association of Canada. Good evening, Hassan. Just like the speaker below, you'll see right underneath the mic, there's a button that says speak. Just press that. And reminder, you have 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's a 1 minute.
Can you hear me okay? Hello, everyone. My name is actually Fauzi Mana. I'm here on behalf of Hassan. I'm here on behalf of the Muslim Association of Canada's Mississauga chapter. And I'm very happy to be here with you today to talk about the important topic of Islamophobia. So thank you for having me. About Muslim Association of Canada, or MAC. MAC is a national organization with reach across the country. We have 18 mosques, 28 schools throughout the country. And we have many of them here, right here in Peel, especially serving the urban centers of Mississauga, of Brampton. We do have a full-time school, Olive Grove. We do have a mosque, the Islamic Community of Center of Ontario, and we do have several part-time schools as well, and weekend schools throughout the region of Peel. We do serve thousands of community members, throughout the country, and we do have a vast network of volunteers and members and employees. Most of them are actually right here in the region of Peel, like through our institutions. Our head office as well is right here in the region of Peel as well. So if we go to the next slide, I'd like to just a little bit touch on the demographic representation of Muslims within Peel. Muslims represent a very diverse, a group. There's about 13% of the region of Peel, of the members or of the residents of Peel, are actually Muslims. This makes us the second largest demographic in Peel. And that's kind of equally divided between Mississauga and Brampton as well. So, when we talk about Islamophobia, it's very significant when you look at it from that perspective. If you look at it on a 13% demographic representation across the region, then it presents a significant issue for the region to deal with and for the region the regional police of Peel to deal with as well. It's important to also note on the next slide that Islamophobia does not only impact the Muslims in its most fundamental form, which is the basic right to safety and the basic right to security. If we go to just one more slide, please. But it also impacts freedom of religion and freedom of belief when Muslims are not safe and secure in their own mosques, in their own schools, in their own institutions. That impacts that very basic right of freedom of religion as well. It is also an issue of equality and non-discrimination. It also impacts access to justice. As you've heard earlier, when Muslims are double victimized, they will think twice about going and reporting issues or engaging with police or engaging with any institutions for that matter to go and look after the issues that they face. And lastly, what's good for Muslims, it's good for the community at large. When Islamophobia disappears, we will have a more cohesive community and more healthy interactions, a better environment that fosters mutual respect, regardless of what type of residence that we're talking about in that case. So Islamophobia is important because of all those reasons, not because it's important for Muslims, not because it's just a basic right, but because of all those factors that are important to think about and consider as well. On the next slide, just quickly because we always look at the basic manifestation of Islamophobia being violence. And that's sure, that is a part of it, but that is not the full story. You heard earlier about, vandalism of sacred places. And worse yet, when these things combine, when you have violence in sacred places. And when that repeats time and time again, it really becomes very problematic. When people don't feel safe in the very places they're supposed to be more comfortable in, and that they need to access more often than not, then that presents a bigger problem than when any of those things manifests on its own. There's also the issue of, obviously, verbal abuse and discrimination. This happens on the streets. It happens, it happens on the sidewalks. It happens in the malls. It does not just happen in places of worship. And that's very important to understand and recognize as well. So just to fast forward to the recommendations on the next slide, the first recommendation is to really understand the context. Any act of violence has prejudice, bigotry, intent behind it. And when somebody has a lot of that, they will have a tendency to not just act, but to also be repeat offenders. So it's important to understand, that context in order to be able to anticipate it, prevent it, and act on it, and prevent it from repeating, which is even more important. The second is about prevention over reaction. So reaction is very important, but prevention is more important. If you look at a lot of the incidents that have happened in the past, whether the Quebec City Mosque, there was a lot of association with far-right groups, anti-feminist groups, a lot of fascination with the Muslim ban in the U.S., the executive order, French far-right groups, etc. Understanding and getting down to root cause analysis and understanding the vast network, that Islamophobia has and the influencers of it becomes super important, because these things don't happen in a vacuum. And lastly, encouraging reporting of hate crimes is very important as well, and doing that through direct and indirect channels. Direct channels like outreach events that the police can kind of conduct on a regular basis, but also through other organizations that community members already have access to, like schools, like mosques, building toolkits for imams. Certainly MAC, as an organization with large reach, can assist and can initiate such toolkits with the collaboration with the police and with the police board. And lastly, maybe improving the reporting process so people can do it in more ways, perhaps even through the mosques, through the schools, through the organizations that they already have access to, because they feel very comfortable in those environments. Sometimes it takes a lot for somebody to go and call or go online. So to do it in places where they already are becomes a lot easier and more accessible for them as well. And I'll wrap with, obviously, public awareness campaigns are super important, because you don't reach everybody at the mosque, you don't reach everybody at the school, so you want to be able to reach the broadest group of people, and you can do that, through social media, through physical campaigns, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am familiar with MAC. I had the opportunity to attend an event last year, and it was phenomenal. And I know what I walked away with most is the amount of work that they do in the community. And it was a women's event, and what was amazing to see was the support system and network built for the next generations that were in the room, because it was just a beautiful event. It was very well done. But I think what's amazing is the education, the awareness, and the support system, because the next generation needs that. They need to feel that they're safe and that they have, a village around them, right, to help raise them. So, and I think some of the points you made today are very valid as well. I think something about, just the fact that it is true. It is hard for people to report. It's not an easy thing to come and say, this happened to me, this experience has happened to me. And I think some points you made about reporting through your, most comfortable place that you are at, it's an interesting point that you made as well. So thank you for sharing that today. I'm going to open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Fauzi. I have two questions.
Yep.
Two things stood out to me. The first is the connection you talked about between Islamophobia and hate crimes and unfortunate tragic incidents like Quebec City, and the misinformation or even the hate that is spread online, or and so I wonder, like, I'm just thinking, often the hate crimes unit kind of react to hate crimes and are trained to deal with them, but I wonder are you suggesting that Peel Police should be more monitoring certain types of activities online or in other places that ultimately could lead to hate crimes in a more preventative, proactive way? Is that what you're saying?
I think certainly it starts with understanding, first of all, because if you monitor but you don't have understanding of context, like who are the influencers, what does the network look like, who are the movers and shakers in this Islamophobia network, who fund these kinds of activities online, it really starts with understanding those things first and foremost. And then, it extends a layer deeper into, in certain contexts, making those connections and links between activities that happen online and and between what was collected in terms of wealth of information on what does this Islamophobia network really looks like within and outside of the country, within and outside of the region, and who's behind it. So I wouldn't say it's restricted to, I would say, monitoring, because that's also a double-edged sword. But really, it starts with understanding the background, influencers, the network, the funding, things of that nature for those kinds of groups, and for the those behind Islamophobia, and then it becomes about drawing those links, local links, I would say, that exist within the region, and based on it to try and exercise a more of a preventative approach versus a reactive one.
Okay, and my second question on reporting hate crimes. I mean, earlier we heard about a suggestion from Special Representative on Islamophobia, Mira, about an online platform for people to report. You've actually talked about something completely different, which is really interesting, because I remember when the vaccine rollout happened in the government's, wasn't able to roll it out to certain communities, more vulnerable communities, more marginalized communities. And so they started to rely on community organizations who have physical spaces that these communities already feel safe going to have vaccine clinics. And so just in that kind of that thought process, you're saying that instead of just our typical outreach, the police service could use mosques, for instance, as a point where people can report hate crimes, or at least learn to report hate crimes. I find that a really interesting concept, because it takes our relationship beyond just general outreach to actually making our community groups a part of the overall, engagement or point of contact from a policing perspective with residents. So I don't know if you have additional thoughts on that, but I thank you for that suggestion.
Maybe just two quick thoughts on that. Like, one is, it's really about going from a one-way relationship where the police tell the community into making it a bi-directional relationship, is, I would say, becomes really important here, and having people feel that, in a way where they are, which takes me to my second point, feel it. You want to make organizations and community organization feel empowered to do something. There's nothing like, having frustrated leaders in communities who don't know what to do themselves. If the average person don't know what to do, they're going to go to a community leader. And if the community leader doesn't have the ability, the tools to be able to help, to be able to provide feedback or input or response to their community members, that even increases the amount of frustration. So working through community organizations for reporting, for information sharing and socialization becomes even more paramount to make these communities feel empowered.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation today. Next, we have Ms. Noka Dakru. Oh, hi, Noka. Former school trustee and Peel District School Board. And same thing, Noka, the red button at the bottom of the mic there, it says speak. Yep, just press that, and reminder, you have 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have a minute. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for putting together this forum for many community members to speak. It was great to hear from everyone. My name is Noka Dekru, and I'm here to talk to you. My presentation is going to sound a little bit different. I'm going to talk to you about lessons learned at the school board that apply to police board governance and human rights. And I had a whole technical presentation, but I decided to put that away for now and just talk about 3 lessons I learned as a board member during my very, very exciting time at the school board. So if you don't know very much about me, I'm a former school board trustee. I served 8 years at the Peel District School Board, and I advocated for the review, or was one of the 2 trustees that advocated for the review that resulted in the supervision of the Peel District School Board due to issues of discrimination, specifically anti-Black racism and Islamophobia. I also ushered the first anti-Islamophobia strategy ever in public education. I brought in faith-based heritage months that are now celebrated in every school across the region, and a few other things that you may have heard about. Now, I am the founder of Better Space Mediation and Therapy. Professionally, I'm a registered social worker, a psychotherapist, and a family mediator. So, lesson number 1, get to know yourself as a board member. Learn your areas of strength and the areas that need improvement. And I'll give you an example of this. I got elected very young, as you can tell. I'm still very young. And I managed to really quickly get a pretty quick handle on policymaking and was a pretty skilled communicator. But I had a really difficult time with people disagreeing with me and things not going my way. So after that experience, I learned to get into mediation because I decided to get into mediation because I wanted to know how to manage conflict better. There is no expectation that you're an expert on everything. And there will be areas where you will need improvement. And if that area happens to be human rights, then there are opportunities to learn. But the point being is to be able to see policy, budget, human rights matters from a human rights lens and human rights perspective. You've got to develop the skills to be able to do that. And yes, you will always have the support of community members and very professional staff and experts, but it's important to really have a really good handle on where you need to zoom in terms of a policy, where some of the areas of concerns may be, and to be able to identify things pretty quickly. As a board, I'm not sure if you do this already, and I apologize if you do, develop an annual learning plan. We never had one up until things kind of changed. The board secretary, I'm not sure if you have one, or the chief can work with the board to figure out areas that need improvement and create a learning plan that does just that. And that gives you an opportunity to hold the board accountable. And don't be afraid to mandate similar trainings to staff. Lesson number 2, keep an ear to the ground. Governance is complicated. You're responsible for everything, but you can't do everything, and you can't be everywhere. This means you need to learn what's going on from other people. Your officers, community stakeholders, open forums like this are opportunities to hear feedback that you may not hear directly. And they have a sense of what's going on beyond these walls, even if they don't necessarily understand the specifics of policy making and all the acts that go into some of the work that you have to do. And lesson number 3, and this is the most important one of all, don't aim for perfection. A public sector organization of this size will never be perfect. And I know there's someone from the communications department who's going to hate everything I'm about to say, but there will be mistakes. And we live in a time when everything is about creating a perfect PR image and a perfect brand. But clinging to a perfect PR image can be detrimental to a cause like this. Because when something happens and you must react, it may prevent you from doing what you need to do. It may prevent you from reacting appropriately and make things worse. And I could cite examples from the school board, but I'm not going to do that. So that's really all I wanted to share. But I really want to stress the don't aim for perfection part. Aim for progress, and with the understanding that you're never really going to reach perfection, that gives you the opportunity to continue to strive for progress. And this is challenging work, so I really thank you for this. This is, courageous and brave in our world today, in our communities today. You've got many different stakeholders. You have competing interests that you're going to have to deal with. Keep it up. And we're all here to support you, clearly. Lots of people are here to support you in the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Noka, and thank you for all your feedback and insight and your 3 most important things. Thank you. I think tonight, more than anything, was about listening to the community, and it means a lot to us, the turnout, the speakers who took the time to put together their presentations, and that's really why we were here, and we hope to continue, like I said, in the start to. That is the plan every month. We want to continue this. And these are happening at different levels as well while we're doing it at the board level. Our Peel Regional Police is also doing engagement sessions. So I think overall we're trying to ensure that we're listening to the community, that we're here. So thank you for your feedback. I think there were some really great takeaways from that as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
I know that Emirati had some questions.
Okay, thank you for coming today. I want to maybe focus in on the example you gave of one of the things you lent your voice to when you were a board member, and that was the issues at the board and the ultimate supervision decision that took place. And I don't, I hope, and I don't here we will never be in that situation. We're doing a lot of work to make sure that we are on the right track. But just in the spirit of that space of governance, my question to you first is, as you know, as a board member, there's a very fine line, and it's important to segregate and separate operations from governance. And, as a board, you took the decision that there was enough that you had to actually not just engage in the operational side, but stop the operation, right? Like that's the worst case scenario. What were the signals to you, and as where you take on that role from a governance perspective, that you made that decision? I know there were non-compliance issues, et cetera, but just in the spirit, when as a board you think, in your opinion, should kind of realize its governance role kind of now has to be stretched?
So I think I can remember the moment this happened, but I'll tell you, it was when I realized that there were real human rights issues at stake, and things were consistent, and we kept hearing stories and stories and stories, and people start coming to you, right? And I was vocal, so I was vocal at the board talking about policy issues, obviously not operations. But I would put motions that are more, progressive, that are more along the lines of anti-racism. I fought really hard for the We Rise Together initiative when it was started, and tried to keep that going. And people start kind of recognizing that you're an ally, and people start coming to you, and you start hearing enough stories, and you get to a point where you're like, okay, you know what? This isn't working. Now, I have a lot of opinions about public education and the role of an elected trustee and how that needs to be different because of the whole electability portion of it. But you're absolutely right. In terms of governance, there is a very, very fine line between governance and operations. And where do you say that's enough? I think for me, it was when we weren't getting the response that we needed from the administration. And when you ask questions and you're not getting anywhere. You're still aware that there are more issues going on. And as a school board trustee, we're responsible for children, right? To me, that's more important than some rule that somebody wrote in an act that says I'm not allowed to get involved in operations. So I'm not a school board trustee anymore, and I have my reasons for that. But yeah, so I think that's a very long answer to your question.
The second question is, part of that whole exercise was that the school board, can I say, maybe lost trust lost trust of the community and its ability to deliver its responsibility. If I recall, and obviously we hear time and time again that trust is an issue between the residents of Peel and police, and we are working very hard, and there's lots of exercises, a lot of things happening to rebuild trust, right? What we do understand, I think I can say confidently between the service and the board, is that listening, like these exercises, are just a step, and they're not the answer to rebuilding trust. What more is needed? Like, what did you learn from your experience at the school board in further steps beyond this listening exercise that allowed you to go back on that path of rebuilding trust with the community?
So one of the big things, and this is why I said something about that here, we decided to, part of the review was around training having mandatory training sessions and making sure that because your officers, just like but the school board staff, they're your public facing person. They're the ones interacting with the community. You're not, right? They're interacting with the community every single day. They're representing you. And, it was mandatory training that kind of helped us move the dial a little bit further. But I think the biggest thing was really the lack of accountability. I'm not sure if that's as much of an issue in policing, but it's a really big issue I find in public education, where things happen and there isn't a lot of accountability. So yeah, but I think, how did we move forward to build trust? I think the board is still working on that. I don't think they're there. At least that's my opinion. But I think the most important thing is to get away from the whole PR world and the PR image. It doesn't matter how many newsletters and how many great videos your communications department puts out. If your officers on the ground who are meeting people every single day aren't representing the police service in the best way possible, that stuff's not going to work. So that's why don't aim for perfection, and just understand that you'll need tweaking along the way.
Thank you so much, Noka, for coming out today in your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mohsin Kermali, who's the Executive Director of Nasia Mental Health. Thank you. I believe Mohsin's been before, yes. I believe, Mohsin, you've presented before to us at the board meeting. That's right.
I got the speaker button right this time.
It's all good. I just want to remind you, I'm sure you already know this, 5 minutes, and I'll let you know if it's a 1 minute warning.
I don't think I'm going to go the 5 minutes. Everyone prior to me that I was listening to, just really engaging conversation. So first and foremost, thank you for having us here today. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mohsin Kermali. I'm currently serving as the director, one of the directors at Nasia Youth Helpline, aka Nasia Mental Health. And yes, we have been here before, and really happy to be part of this collective voice that the committee has decided to kind of put on today. I want to thank you all for your dedication and hard work, and especially welcome back Ahmed Atiyah to the board. Your value to the board and the community has always been highly commendable, and we look forward to seeing the impact as always. Thank you, Rob, as well, for the communication. Appreciate every board member and also the services that PRP is doing in the community. For those of you who do not know, Nasia is a registered charity and operates under 3 primary mandates. We offer a peer support helpline and text line open 7 days a week, and we provide peer support to those who are struggling with life's challenges, primarily targeting youth and Muslim youth across the nation. Secondly, we try our best through education and an outreach lens to prevent further mental health issues within not only our community, but the broader society by engaging in meaning advocacy and workshops so that we may bridge potential gaps and break down stigma associated with mental health. And lastly, we started a web therapy program, a campaign that's nationwide across Canada that is available for all Canadians across the nation with barrier-free access to seek therapy. So a couple of reasons why we're here tonight specifically. One is to show our support for these types of initiatives and appreciate the collective voice. Governing policies and human rights should always have community involvement, and we are encouraged by the direction that the Peel Police Board is taking. At Nasia, we have seen incidents occur within Peel in the past months and years that we hope can be avoided in future by active involvement, and we hope to see the positive outcomes in our society. The main issue I would like to bring up today, and I think, hearing the past presenters, is talking about having cultural sensitivity built into the response and into our governing and policy frameworks that it seems like we're endeavoring on here. This, in our opinion, would be of immense value when we're developing and looking at specifically around policy. So cultural sensitivity, be it religious, cultural sensitivity, any sort of demographic sensitivity should be at the forefront when we're talking about human rights and developing policy, in our opinion. There are a few recommendations that I would like to put forth tonight, and always welcome future consult with Nasiha and other community partners in the room and who are listening as well. With an increase in service, everyone has seen that, both upstream to resources such as Nasiha. The first thing we would like to do is welcome a continuing working group to tackle these issues with community partners. We are grateful to be part of the PRP Inclusion Committee putting forth a module to tackle anti-hate crimes. That I think is something that, since the last time we were here presenting and in front of the board, PRP has taken that step, and I think it's a really significant step in, putting forth this notion of building trust within the region, right? Especially around anti-hate. Our hope, though, is to have greater space by focusing with organizations not only around mental health, but have that culturally sensitive approach. Peel is, one of the most diverse nations or regions, if you will, across maybe the world even. So making sure that cultural sensitivity is at the heart is very important. And we would welcome that type of a working group, an ongoing working group. The second is...
Sorry, my apologies, 1 minute.
Yeah, no problem. Maybe I will take more than 5, sorry. In the Peel Police Use of Force report given annually, to making sure that there's more data points included in that report, specifically around mental health issues and other data points that we can work towards improving our service and in the region. And lastly, if there are any trainings that are being developed or in future iterations of being developed, that Nasiha and other partners who can bring a lens of cultural sensitivity should be consulted on, as it will help create a more equitable framework. I thank you all for your time. Welcome any questions, and just want to echo some of the past presenters, really interesting ideas put forth. I really like the one from Mac and Fozy in regards to using the space, cultural spaces such as mosques, synagogues, temples, as a building platform for such endeavors. That can work really well from just building trust, within the community. So thank you very much. Appreciate it, and welcoming, I guess, Ahmad's questions coming forward.
So firstly, thank you so much for coming back and presenting to us. I still remember the amount that you had shared before and the work that you guys are doing in the community. Mental health is not just a conversation, it's a critical conversation. I know for all of us, it's something that matters. It's a lot of resources that are being put behind it. So thank you for all the work you are doing and your organization in the community.
Appreciate it.
And I'm going to just open it up to questions for Ahmed.
Your comment on the use of force report is very interesting because it's coming out soon for this year, and it's a conversation that the service is constantly having. And I'm not sure that mental health, I don't know, services here, mental health or disabilities is something on the use of force. It is. I'm getting nods, so that's great. So recommendation hopefully will be taken care of.
Yeah, and that's great to hear.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my mind more. Like I know, when I think of Nasiha, I'm thinking, the service has done a lot of work with the region on situation tables.
Yeah.
And upstream services and getting people, get to the right services. And my question is Nasiha part of that? And I wonder, you talk about cultural sensitivity in the way we police, but also are we having cultural sensitivity in mind in that overall big picture? Are we directing people, even just within the mental health, are we directing people to the right services that are culturally sensitive to them? And are you plugged in enough? Are groups like you, maybe there are other kind of faith-based mental health groups, are they plugged into the system well enough to play their role?
I think to answer the question, are they plugged in well enough? Probably not, because if I think we all were plugged in well enough, we would see different results, right? So I think more work needs to be done, specifically in regards to the mental health space. I think if we have data points that we can then come together as a collective table to actually talk about those data points and what we can do with that data so that we can prevent, further issues. I think that's important. But I think that steps such as this one and what, for example, PRP is doing, is important within the community to make sure that those resources, such as Nasiha and other groups that are out there, are accessible by the people that Peel serves, but then also are at the table to be able to help drive that policy and that shift, right? If that answers. But I think there's a lot more work that we can do collectively.
Thank you so much for coming out. And next we have Vipin Sani, Executive Director of Seva Food Bank. Thank you, Vipin. Same thing, the speak button at the end of at the bottom of the mic. Perfect. And I'll give you a 1-minute warning for your 5 minutes. Thanks, Vipin.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. Big thank you to Smitha, Angela, Chief Nish, Rob. I really appreciate the platform. I'm going to be talking to you about food insecurity and impacts and interaction with police. So nutrition and food is taken for granted. It happens again and again. Something as simple as this bottle of water can have a huge impact on a person's situation. We don't think about that. So I'm going to talk about hunger and desperation. First of all, people who lack access to food may be desperate enough to do things like commit crimes. It does happen. It's a sad state of affairs, and it's a sad statement to make, but we have to keep in mind that access to clean drinking water and food are fundamental rights in this country and on this planet. Yet individuals are feeling the need where they need to get out and steal. That desperation, I'm sure individuals at PRP are seeing regularly. From an emotional and mental health standpoint, hunger can affect a person's emotional and mental state, making them more irritable, anxious, emotionally unstable. When individuals in the state come into contact with law enforcement, very often their behavior will be unpredictable. They may be less responsive to commands, which can be a huge issue. Adding that fog of hunger only exacerbates these situations. When we talk about domestic disputes, food insecurity can contribute to stress within households, as we all know. That can lead to domestic situations. Often law enforcement is called to intervene into these tense situations. And again, that fog of hunger and lack of nutrition can cause serious issues. Seva, in partnership with PRP, has provided and continues to provide food to survivors at motels, individuals escaping situations. We just helped someone escaping from Western Canada. They were on a feeding tube, needed a particular type of meal replacement, very expensive. Ontario Works doesn't kick in. So those types of partnerships are incredibly important. We're not sure what would happen to this individual if that partnership wasn't there. Community relations. In communities with high levels of need, there's a general sense of frustration, I think, and distrust towards law enforcement. Individuals feel failed by a larger system, and police are very much a part of that large system. Having those on-the-ground interactions, police are often bearing the brunt of the frustrations of those communities. They have no one to go to. They try calling people at Service Canada. They're on the hold for 2 hours. There's a cop. I'm going to unload on them. Building bridges through things like community events, barbecues, food drives. These are things that the DMU is already doing. I would encourage more of that because we're seeing improvements in places like 5 and 10 where I grew up, where when we saw cop cars, we ran. I'm talking about my own personal experiences here. In all these examples, police are dealing with individuals in heightened states. When you aren't feeling well and you interact with someone, often the first question is, have you eaten anything? Maybe have some water, right? why aren't we doing the same in these situations? So in terms of recommendations, something I should mention also is symptoms of something like low potassium look very much like dementia. There can be a lot of erratic behavior. I'm not sure a lot of police know that. But something as simple as, in terms of recommendations, when you're arriving at a call, maybe some non-perishables, maybe some shelf-stable foods. Ask the questions. When's the last time that you ate or had something to drink? A granola bar or juice box may seem rather insignificant, but again, they can play a major part in positive impacts. Partnerships like we have with PRP at IPV, the Safe Center of Peel. Survivors can get something to eat before they make a statement. That's huge. Clear some of those cobwebs, something warm to eat in your stomach. This is quite possibly the worst day of their lives. And that little bit of food can have a major impact. So I think that's really what I wanted to cover.
Whitman, first of all, thank you so much. Save a Food Bank does incredible work in the community. And, just the way that they treat everybody that comes to the door with dignity and respect. The fact that they refer to them as clients. I always remember that when they did the tour. I thought that was, or the fact that there's food aisles and you can go and shop yourself for what you need. I mean, these are just simple little things that are built in, but to create that dignity and respect. So thank you for all the work that you do. I know you work very closely with PRP as well. And I think you share some really good insights, just about, behavior and, hunger, right? And just how it manifests and how someone can appear one way, but it could be as simple as this versus that. So thank you for sharing that insight and feedback. I think it's really good takeaways as well for us. I'm going to just turn it over to Ahmed as well.
Question. I mean, it's a really interesting area of human rights, and I really thank you for coming because, hate crimes takes a lot of attention when we talk about these things, but this is impacting people. I mean, we saw in the pandemic the rise of people needing food, and it's not. We may think of someone who's, has less income, but everyday people are feeling the pinch, and
for sure.
My question to you is, when there is an actual nexus between, access to food, someone hasn't eaten, can't afford food, and then a crime. In your experience, does the policing approach and the justice system show compassion to people when it is identified that that's the source cause, like this is the social issue that's caused it?
So like I mentioned at the beginning of my 5 minutes, this is something that's largely ignored, right? It's not a situation that's really considered. That desperation, although it may be there, it's not recognized, and I don't think it's considered. I have a grocery store manager close to here, Ontario, in Dundas, that is more sad than he is upset about the amount of theft going on in his shop. He hates it. He hates that people are coming to that. He doesn't hate it because of the shrinkage and the loss. He hates that humanity is getting to that point. So no, I think it's largely ignored.
And is there research on this area? You're talking from lived experience.
Yes.
But have people invested in research to understand this nexus?
That's a great question. That's not something I've looked into. Most of my days is putting out fires and trying to find food and money. That's interesting. It's something I can certainly look into. There may be something out there.
Thank you.
Using food as medicine is becoming more and more it's coming to the forefront at larger academic institutions. So there may be something along those lines.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just thank you again. And just a reminder, support your local food banks. I think this is just another reminder to continue to do that. So this concludes our first community consultation of the board's Governance and Human Rights Committee. I really, truly want to say thank you to every single presenter who took the time to put together the presentation. We truly appreciate your time, your input, your experiences that you've shared. And we will be adjourning in the next 5 minutes and then moving into the in-camera, the rest of our committee meeting. But thank you again to everybody, and reminder that the next two sessions are coming up, one in October 5th, and the next one is November 28th, correct? October 3rd. My apologies. So we hope to see more and more of you come out and support these engagement sessions. We were listening. Thank you so much.